Boom, what's up everyone? Welcome to Simulation. We have an epic episode for you today. We are going to be talking about nanotechnology. We're going to be talking about open source, cybersecurity, and just making sure that technology is moving us in a positive direction. Who better to have than the co-founder of Foresight Institute with us, Christine Peterson.
Hi, Alan. Thanks. This is going to be fun.
This is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on to the show.
I'm enjoying it already.
We have like we met like what, 2-ish years ago,
Yeah.
something around that, and ever since then I've just felt really good about what Foresight's doing and about just this, your presence in this field makes me feel like we're moving it in the right direction.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you.
And there's so much to talk about, making sure that technology is moving in this really important, positive, ethical direction for humanity. So, all right, let's start this, because this is 32 years with Foresight. This is not short.
It's true. No, we've been at this for some time.
Yeah, this is not a short time. So Eric Drexel and you.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, and so this is based on the book, which we have an image of the book,
Right.
which is, and so as we pull this up, you're gonna kind of like give us the quick understanding of like, okay, we have the coming era of nanotech, we have all these exponential technologies that are coming, and how do you end up figuring out what, like an organization like Foresight that can help sort of guide the conversations?
Right. We were both at MIT at the time, and Eric, the Foresight co-founder, had an idea. He realized that, wow, at that time we were still just in the very early days of looking at natural molecular machinery, biological molecular machinery. We were just starting to learn how it works. But he had the insight that, not only will we be able someday to modify these biological molecular machines, but in principle, you could make non-biological molecular machinery that could, in principle, do manufacturing. And I guess this hit him like a ton of bricks. And when he started explaining it to his friends, we were boggled. And he was even starting, even though in those early days, to look at the implications and say, what will this mean for humanity? And we were very, very impressed and kind of stunned by the magnitude of this insight and the amount of elaboration he did to it. So first he published a number of some technical work, of course, but then eventually he did this more of a accessible book for the general public, because he felt that the general public deserved to know what was coming in the longer term.
Yep.
And that we thought, gee, this is going to be a very powerful thing. We'd better start an organization. So in the back of the book it says, contact Foresight Institute. We didn't have Foresight Institute at the time, but we knew that there'd be a big reaction, and we were right, there was.
And there's so much to talk about regarding just having this sort of on the scale of nanometers, having just us to be able to create abundance and solve so many problems. And okay, we'll get into that as we keep talking. I think something else that this kind of inspired, besides the Foresight Institute, was just for you to also become a nanotechnology communicator and more of a science communicator. Is that right? And futurist in this sense?
Yes, that's right. I think in the very early days, Eric carried that burden alone, but this thing got too big for one person to handle that role. So now, of course, I was perhaps the second one, but now there are quite a few people who are able to bring these ideas both to the technical community, the research community, but also to policymakers, and even to the general public, as I think they deserve to know.
Yeah, so this is very interesting that you keep referencing this, general public, to disseminate the information in ways that are relatable and fun and engaging, that inspire people to make change in their life to get ready for this, is something we care about here so much, and we do across these different disciplines. So I'm really happy that, that this happened in '86, and 32 years later, we're still really not preparing ourselves policy-wise and conversation-wise? What?
Well, as we'll talk about later, there are so many other even more urgent topics.
Yes.
And that Foresight also is grappling with. So I think we'll get there. The path to molecular nanotechnology is through chemistry. Chemistry is kind of an incremental science. And we can see steady progress toward molecular nanotechnology, but it's going to continue to be incremental. So it's going to be one of those things that kind of sneak up on us, I think.
Yeah, and actually a lot of things that we're going to talk about are kind of sneaking up on us, and it's good that Foresight is in preparing us for these exponential technologies and having these conversations. So you were teaching me earlier that the mission of Foresight is to guide technology in a positive direction.
That's right. If we can identify negative applications that, for example, people are not aware of yet and that perhaps need to be discussed so that we can avoid them, we will bring those up.
Yep.
Or we also try to emphasize, okay, here are the benefits from the positive applications, because people don't want to hear about the negative stuff all the time. They want to be inspired by, well, what can the positive uses, what benefits do they bring to us? And so we spend a lot of time on that. One of our key staff members now is Alison Dudeman, and you know one of her topics is existential hope, which is another way of communicating this vision of how can we get people excited about a positive future, building a positive future, rather than always focusing on the downsides of technology.
Yep, yep. And so, okay, so then there's this sort of, there's this need to have full-ranging conversation about the good, the bad, the middle, all of the nuance around the ethics and how the technology works. And then once we compile all these, I guess we're running simulations about what happens with the bad, what happens with the good, and then we figure out how to properly guide policy and all this other work. So maybe as we kind of, get our way into one of our first topics of open source, maybe give us an example of where Foresight has really taken that on in a field and helped make sure that, policy was pushed and guided and communication was propagated out.
There's two areas I would point at. One is in the area of molecular nanotechnology. We already have safety guidelines published on the web. They've been out there for some time. I think they kind of they anticipate. They're ready before we need them. And how often does that happen?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's huge.
So we're pretty proud of that. And then also we are, and we'll talk about this later, we are looking pretty seriously at the interaction between artificial intelligence and governance issues and how all that plays with cybersecurity. I don't think anyone else is really looking heavily at that topic yet. And what we're doing there is we're not ready to issue safety guidelines, but what we're doing is we are convening the experts.
Yes.
From the various AI safety organizations. We do this about once a year to explore how all these things interact and to take the next step forward toward safety guidelines.
Yeah, that's huge. I love your example of just having the safety guidelines there before we need them. That's the level that humanity should be at, for us to feel like we're more like adults instead of children running around just waiting for the hiccups to happen. Okay, so when approximately was it that the word open source kind of came into our nomenclature?
Well, it turns out right now, this year is the 20th anniversary. So we know exactly it was in 1998. And at that time, for those of your viewers who remember, that was when Netscape was putting their browser out to make it become free software. But there was a lot of confusion around the term free software. Many people would focus only on the meaning of free that means zero price.
Yeah.
And that is not the meaning that the originators of that term meant.
Yeah.
They wanted to focus on free as in freedom.
Yeah.
But many users were confused, and it was hindering the industry, because in order to have an industry, they wanted to sell support services for open source, and this costs money. But if you go to someone and says, here's some free software, now you have to pay for service, they feel unhappy. They feel confused and maybe even deliberately misled. So we realized, you know, although the term free software has many benefits, we need an additional term when we're dealing with new people that will communicate what are the benefits of this that are not based on price. Because the benefits fundamentally aren't based on price. They're very different.
And then would you say that then the sort of another part of the importance of open source is that it enables people to take and build on top and make it better?
That's right. For those of your viewers who aren't programmers, there's the kind of code that you buy from a proprietary provider like Microsoft. And if you give that to a programmer, they can't understand it. But if you can get what they call the source code underneath, then you can modify it. You can change the software. And so in open source, you can always get that source code, always. It's required. Mm-hmm. So that means that you can always change it, you can modify it, you can share it with anyone and not get in trouble. So which means software is improvable. Yeah. Unlike proprietary code, and I'm sure we've all had this experience where you're using a piece of software and there's a problem and the company won't fix it and it stays in there for years.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's infuriating.
Yeah. So then open source has then sort of enabled us to augment the different softwares that we use across our lives, and open source now over the last 20 years, you said, how has it shifted society tectonically? Like, what have been the disruptions that have occurred?
Well, it turns out that most of the internet, the underlying parts of the internet, are open source. And for those of you who are using any of the Internet of Things, that is basically based on open source also. So to the retail user, and I include myself in that category, I'm not a programmer, we tend to see the world through a little thin layer of proprietary code, but underneath that is this huge mountain of open source code that supports the internet.
And then that sort of, you're opening up the box that is the foundation of the internet, which is the open source code. Then all of the websites and online software, all of this is built on top of that, and then people become proprietary in the way that they build on top.
Yes, often in the last layer before people like me interact with code, there's a layer that makes it all pretty. And somebody's making money off that, and that's fine. But underneath that, the reason things work as well as they do often is due to open source code.
And then that's kind of, we can call that a protocol. It's like the internet protocol.
You can think of it that way, sure.
Okay, because I'm making calls to receive information on my computer. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then this also is become a new in terms of like hyped up this era of open sourcing technologies like blockchain that enable us to completely decentralize or just democratize information in new transparent ways.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the more we switch to open source, not just in software, but in other areas. For example, now there's such a thing as open source law. There's open source medicine, open source architecture, you name it. Open source now has gone beyond software. It's just a term we use to mean that the plans, the way to build something is known to everyone and is freely available. It's changeable. It's a way, as you say, I think the democratization of technology. I think it's a good term.
I love that. Yeah, open sourcing is crucial because it democratizes. So then, if you have maybe a country that is emerging, it's an emerging country, an emerging market, they can look at open source law and say that, hey, these are maybe some of the laws that we should take in, or open source medicine, or open source mechanical engineering or electrical engineering. Yeah.
Right. So it's freely available. They can change it to customize it to their own particular needs, which is critically important. And the old term of free is still true. They have the freedom, and these things are zero price as well, which is also important.
It's huge.
Especially in the developing world. So yeah, all these things are very exciting in the longer term. I'm thrilled to see something that started with a small group of us saying, you know, this name needs changing. And when I thought of it, I thought, well, open source is good enough. I didn't think, oh, it's the best term. I thought, it's good enough, it does the job, you know?
Yeah.
And then to just see it take off like this, and then to expand beyond software has been such a thrill for me.
Yes.
I get a little tiny thrill every single time I hear the term open source. And that's a lot. That's a lot.
That's great.
Yeah.
These are the contributions that we can make, and hear those little thrills.
Well, I figure I can dine out on this one indefinitely.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this part's really important to address about open source, as maybe we move into maybe some cybersecurity next, but just right on the way, tell us about what you see happening with the economies of data are kind of shifting towards open source, as in if you're not open sourcing your data about who your customers are, and how if Google could open source the data with Amazon and Apple and Facebook, that maybe there could be some insanely positive ways that we could amplify living. So where do you see these like economies of data shifting, but also the general data privacy stuff?
Yeah, it's a very controversial topic right now because of the privacy issues. And then there's an additional angle, which is, of course, AI now seems to be more and more based on what data can you run on. That's when a big advance, under the current technologies that they're using for AI, it's heavily dependent on the amount of data and the quality of the data that you can run these algorithms on. And the companies don't necessarily want to share that data with their competitors.
Yes.
So there are these gigantic bodies of data out there, big companies like Google and other companies like Apple, and any of the big companies now are sitting on these huge mountains of data that they can run through their AI algorithms and learn fascinating things about all of us. How that interacts with privacy, I don't know, but there's a tremendous proprietary value to them of holding on to this data.
Huge.
So I don't know how much open sourcing of data we're going to see, especially given the privacy issues. So it's a complicated question.
Yeah. There's something about this millennial Gen Z era that's coming that makes me feel like we will have anonymity, but also transparency, but also have these ecosystems open up so we can gain better insights. Something seems right about that, but I also feel the whole proprietary wanting to hold.
Well, and look what's happening in China with the increasing surveillance and social ratings that they're doing as assigned by government, not over here where we would assign each other ratings, but over there it comes from government. Yeah. And they're getting a tighter and tighter control of their society. To us over here, it seems scary. They seem to be okay with it so far, but I think in Western countries that level of surveillance and control would be very problematic.
It's a big clash geopolitically. It's number one and number two, and the tides may be turning in this century. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah. We'll see what happens. What's one of the things that we care about a lot on the show is being a collaborative bridge across the world, across those hemispheres. Because if U.S. and China can learn how to work together, I think we can basically, in many ways, guarantee that the Earth does not have catastrophic existential issues. I think it can help.
It's a great goal.
It's a goal.
It's a goal.
Yeah, it's a goal. I think so. Okay, so this is a good transition to cybersecurity. Okay, what is the current state of cybersecurity? We've had Roman Yampolsky on the show, and Foresight has had Roman Yampolsky in the AI safety security congregations that you have yearly as well. This is a pretty intense topic and moment.
So what is the state of cybersecurity? It's a complete disaster. It's a mess. It's awful. We're in terrible trouble.
Yeah.
I wish I could be more cheerful about it, but
Rod's ready. Rod's ready to
well,
chime in.
it's interesting whenever we touch on a possible dark truth that all of our guests, you chuckle and you laugh, and I personally, don't find these things funny. Is it a nervous laughter?
It's nervous.
I just don't think it's good for any young person that's watching to see adults laugh at
I think
truths.
It's nervous laughter.
It's a good point, Ron.
Yeah.
I think it's a fear reaction.
Yeah.
It's actually a fear reaction, and
but I'm not afraid. That's what I'm saying. I'm not afraid, and I'm willing. Everybody has to.
You're not afraid?
Fight. No, not at all. Not at all. I can't be afraid, because if you're afraid, that's
right. And
problem.
I think the laughter helps us say, all right, we're going to be brave here, because we have no choice.
Yeah.
There we go.
We have no choice.
Yeah.
There we go. Yes, we do have a choice.
We have to be brave, Ron, because we have to fight this.
Well,
we have to fix this.
Then pick up your weapon.
Right. Well, exactly so. And in fact, that's what we're doing. So let's keep talking, because I want to talk about the weapon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the current state is a mess, and I like how we just had this little analyzing of this sort of like laughter. You actually, when Roman was on the show the second time, Ron, every time Roman would be like, look at this, can you tell if this is real or not? And it's a deep fake. And I'm like, I can't tell if it's real or not. And I'm sitting here looking at him, because it's fully sinking into my body.
We are so messed up
That
now.
we're so messed up now,
Right.
that it's so screwed. And so now, like you called that out, Ron called that out, it's like I'm laughing because I have to be brave, find that,
Sometimes
whatever
it's
that
laugh
is.
or cry.
Laugh or cry, yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
So, okay, so what are what is the weaponry that we have?
What is the weaponry?
Yeah.
Okay. We do have some tools to address this problem, fortunately. It's a huge problem, but we have at least two tools. One is blockchain technology, which has been described to me as a technology that has something like, I think this number's out of date, something like a $4 billion bug bounty, $4 billion bug bounty on it. In other words, if you think about all the Bitcoin in the world, which is a lot of money now, even with the downturn, it's a lot.
Yes.
And it's going up again.
Yep.
If you could hack that successfully and get that money, you would have a huge amount of money.
Yep.
And yet, so far, the fundamental Bitcoin blockchain technology has not been broken. There have been break-ins on the edges around software that's sort of built on top of it, but the fundamental blockchain technology has not been broken yet. So, given that kind of bug bounty, you can say, wow, we're getting some confidence in blockchain security, which is exciting.
And let's give an example as well. This is a very good tool that can be used to counter the issues in cybersecurity. For example, if we are producing a video on the show, we are labeling it with what's going on the simulation blockchain, and it's labeled as this is an actual proof that this is what we did, so that if someone is trying to manipulate the show and say that, hey, we're featuring a guest in this other place that looks like the set and it's completely digitally synthesized, that they can't get away with it.
Yeah, that sounds like the kind of thing that could be done. So blockchain gives us one piece of hope, that it looks like that code is pretty secure at this point. We're getting more and more happy with the quality of that code. It turns out there's another set of code which we've got pretty good confidence in. This is a type of a programming style called object capabilities. It is very security conscious. Security is baked in from the beginning. It takes a while to learn. It's harder to write because you have to look at security at every stage. It's not something where you write the code fast and dirty, see what breaks, and then try to fix it. That's not how this works. This is every single line you write, you're thinking about security. So it's a totally different mindset. And it's going to take some learning. There is, for example, there's a kernel out there called SEL4 that has been demonstrated formally. There's a formal demonstration that this is secure. This was handled by the military, I think, the US military, and also it survived a red team, blue team type attack. So we're getting pretty confident that object capabilities can give us security. Now, so we're still stuck with the problem, which is, we have this huge infrastructure of code which is insecure and insecurable. It's not that there's any way to fix this code. It has to be completely rewritten, which is, when you think about the amount of code in the world, to be rewritten, it's like, you are kidding me, right? That's an immense amount of code. But the way we would handle it is say, well, let's start with what's really important. Let's start with code that...
like the internet.
The internet, for example, utilities, air traffic control, right? You can think of specific areas that are like, these are absolutely critical areas. You'd say, let's start with those. And gaming, maybe we do gaming last. Do the games work well? It's not a life and death matter if there's a problem in your game. So we have tools, we have a pathway. It's a question of education, which is why Foresight's getting involved. There's also a company that is starting to post about this. For those of your viewers who are more on the technical side, you can go to agoric.com and agoric.com, and they will be posting the technical papers, and you can dig in for those of you who are on the technical side. But Foresight will be more on the education side, the outreach side, saying, hey, there's a problem, there's a solution. We don't like to just say there's a problem and there's no solution. There's a problem, and here's the pathway forward to fix the problem.
Yep. That's crucial, and then the action items that are needed to solve it as well with the tools. For some reason, I was just envisioning a new publications that arise, new research papers that arise about blockchain solving cybersecurity issues. I was just envisioning that, and I was like thinking about what would it be like for a 5 or a 10-year-old to be understanding these concepts and embodying them with that very fresh brain, with the fresh real estate in their mind, to be able to take in these really complicated issues at young ages, because then their creativity can just unleash into the space later in life. We desperately need that.
Yeah, I would say for new people coming up, taking the brand new programmers, the people who are 10 years old, and saying, here's a new, before you learn the old way, learn this way, learn the secure way. And then I think once they've learned the secure way, they'll look at the other way and say, you're kidding me. You coded that way and you expected it to work and be secure? How could it possibly? And we'll say, well, you're right, it can't possibly. So I think, we need to start them young with this new model and get them thinking about security from day one.
I love the solutions that you listed. There's also such a strange sort of example of, you just take the current way that social media is posted, and I can basically just take your picture and your name and write whatever message I want and just make it look like you posted it from Twitter or Facebook, and just start circulating that. And then most of the time people won't go to your profile and go look at if you actually said it or not. And so this is a huge issue. And then, like you said, could it be that we have the security systems in place to maybe prevent people from doing that, or maybe have some sort of a blockchain infrastructure to make sure that it's actually you that's doing it or not? This is all so important.
It is, and of course social media probably isn't where we're going to start, right? We listed sort of, all right, where are we going to start? And social media didn't make that list.
Nope.
So it
Internet,
means
aviation, communication.
Somehow we're going to be going through a dangerous period here where people aren't going to be able to trust what they see on their screens anymore, right? You can't now.
You can't now.
You really shouldn't.
Yeah.
You shouldn't now. But it's going to get worse and worse as the tools get better and the prices come down for making fake videos.
Yeah.
We're just going to be seeing those all the time. So people need to learn that skepticism.
Wow. We have the Cambridge Analytica thing that just happened. You're constantly being psychometrically analyzed for your vulnerabilities, for your weak spots, just so that you can be pushed into believing certain things. And it's very unfortunate that now that we have to hold this extreme skepticism with absolutely everything on social media, because we don't know who's trying to megalomaniacally manipulate us.
Eat, drink, and be merry. Tomorrow you die.
It's like so sadly just making me feel like there's no hope. But I think there is lots of hope.
I do too, as long as people like yourself, Christine, are
We're working on it.
We're working on it.
Keep up the good work. We're all counting.
That's right. Go to foresight.org, donate to us, and we'll work on it.
Yes.
So they can all...
And join Foresight.
Yeah.
Come join Foresight down here.
Throw enough money at problems, they go away.
Yeah,
In
well, we'll
Silicon
work on
Valley,
it.
yeah, well, yeah.
Brother, can you
Depends on how much counter money there is in the facing it. Okay, cybersecurity is massive. Good that we got to talk about that a lot. Ron, you threw up a cool image of Christine. You were speaking about open source. We had a good image of you there. And then what did we have as the next image? I want to see. Oh, is it the meat? Is it
piece of meat.
This is funny. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So I think now we're going to talk about what are the applications of nanotechnology.
Yeah.
Right. So it turns out that the term nanotechnology is used for a lot of different things. The meaning that Foresight uses and that we're most excited about is means atomically precise manufacturing. In other words, being able to build with atomic precision. And the reason we have this picture up here is one of the most exciting applications of being able to build with atomic precision is in the area of health, right? We have these organic bodies, and when we're young and healthy, they work great, generally, for most of us. But then over time, since we are fundamentally made of meat, we all know what happens to meat over time. It deteriorates, and it's not a pretty sight. And that's what happens to human bodies over time, too. When we're young, we're usually healthy and strong, but then over time, the molecular machinery of our bodies, the biological molecular machinery starts to break in various ways, and the repair mechanisms can't keep up, or they're not designed for it, and over time our meat doesn't function nearly as well until eventually it's over for us. So when you think about, well, what if you could get in there with a device and put those molecules back where they should be?
Throw that next one up, the next image, because that's exactly what. Wait, go to the next one. And go one more after this. There we go.
There we go. So this is an artist's conception that was used in Scientific American. And although it's a schematic, the fundamentals in terms of the size of the device would be correct. So this would be a proposed molecular machine, very complicated molecular machine that would go in there. And in this picture, what it's doing is it is going after plaque in the arteries.
Yeah.
So the goal would be to remove that plaque. We know that plaque is a big problem.
Angioplasty is the current state of being able to handle that, and it's just putting
very crude.
It's just pushing the plaque against the walls.
Right.
It's not clearing it up like this.
Yeah. The goal would be to go in there, use a device to identify the plaque down at the cellular or even the molecular level, and then basically remove it, process it out of there. So, and I think someday this will happen. It's a very ambitious goal, but I think it will happen.
Yes.
To get there, though, we can back up to one of these earlier pictures.
Okay.
And these are designs. They have not been built yet, but this is a cutaway view of a planetary gear as an example of a machine part that could be built down at the molecular scale. We also make planetary gears at the macro scale. I believe we have these in our cars. But this is a design, an example of what could be done at the molecular level. And if you go to the previous picture, this is another one. This is a fine motion controller designed by, I believe it was, it would probably be Ralph Merkel or Eric Drexler at Institute for Molecular Manufacturing, and this would control the actual tip that was going in there. So you can see some of the parts of these machines have been designed.
Yeah.
Have they been built? No. This is a proof of concept design.
This is the size. This is smaller than a drop of water.
Oh, this is extremely tiny.
100 times smaller than a drop of water.
This would be more like down at the level of the width of a DNA strand, perhaps. So
this is the width of a DNA strand?
Closer to that than the size of a cell. So the point here is, this is not what we would call an artist.
How do we make things at that scale?
With chemistry. That's what chemistry does. This is chemistry under physical control, chemistry under precise 3D control. So you've got 3D robotic control of chemical reactions.
Interesting.
So chemistry, and we understand. And you can do the 3D control now. We're getting there on that. So it will happen. But when we look at this picture, it's not something that's been built, but it's not just an artist's conception. It's something that has been, where we use the very best modeling software with all the chemical laws built into it to model a device. So it's about halfway between just a picture and somebody's imagination and a physical device that's working. It's an engineering design.
Okay, so we're at the level of size of a DNA strand, and we're using chemistry and robots that can manipulate at that level in 3 dimension to make this.
That's the goal.
Oh, that's so cool. And then this is able to do things like send the nanobots in as medical devices, or there's also, we've seen some pretty bad cases of things like sending them out to cause ruckus on the planet as well.
Yeah, if you think about military applications, potential military applications, you could imagine some pretty scary ones. I mean, if you can heal a body, you could also potentially damage a body. So that's one of the scary scenarios that you come up with, and why we would focus on beneficial applications and just try to discourage offensive military use of any technology.
As long as all the countries in the world can agree on that, that would be great.
That's the problem, right?
What about Latvia?
What about Latvia? They're good. They can handle it. We can handle it.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. So this seems like it's not only solving health issues, solving something that I think we want to touch on is how this solves scarcity issues, how this provides for great amounts of abundance. If nanotechnology can be unleashed to its fullest, we can potentially never have an era of me having something precluding you or Ron from having something. We can all have that something.
Right. So there are 2 parts to that. One is you need the atomically precise manufacturing, because what that lets you do is take common materials, even dirt, rearrange the atoms and molecules in common dirt into products that we need. Because the atoms and molecules you need generally are there. They're just not arranged properly.
Yeah.
So in principle, it can be done. But you realize if all the designs were patented, that would be a problem. So we need the open source.
Open sourcing with the nanotech.
We've got to have the tools, but the designs of what you're building, in order to be affordable by, say, the poorest people, they need to be open source designs so that they don't have to pay expensive licensing fees. Now, if people, wealthy people, want to pay for patented designs, high fashion, right? They want to have the very latest car that is perhaps perfectly designed and the latest fashion. They can pay for non-open source plans to build a car. But for your person who is perhaps very low income and just needs basic transportation, you want to have some open source designs for a car that they can build.
Yeah.
So you need both the molecular nanotechnology to build things and the open source plans so that the designs are affordable, so that everyone can have the basics in place.
This is very important. There's so many things to unpack from that. My mind's like, wow, which one do I pull from? You keep saying molecular nanotechnology, so seems to be very important because you're making it evident that the atomics, the atoms around us, even in simple things like the air or dirt, they have what is needed for us to make what we want with the 3D robots that at that level, that if they could just pull those atoms and assemble really quickly that thing, then we could have it.
Yep.
So that's why it's the molecular. They would assemble the atoms into molecules and then make the object.
Right. What you want to do is you want to assemble products from the molecule up so that every molecule is in a designed location.
Yes.
There are some products where you don't care, like concrete. We don't care whether concrete has molecular precision.
Can I ask for a scaling inquiry quick? Mm-hmm. A nanometer is a millionth?
Billionth.
Is a billionth of a meter.
That's right.
Okay, a micrometer is a millionth, I think.
That sounds right.
Okay, so a nano is a billionth of a meter, and then is a nanometer the size of a molecule?
I would say many molecules are that size. Yeah.
One molecule is about 1 nanometer.
Depending,
ish.
Rough.
Okay. Yeah, the small molecules versus the big ones.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, cool. That's good for sizing approximation.
Right.
Yeah. So you're saying construction.
Right. So, but for that, when we looked at that medical device, that,
let's bring up the medical device again, Ron.
For that one, you want that atomic precision. In order to build that device,
the one with the red blood cells.
There we go. To build that device, you do want that level of precision. So while we don't need it for all our products, we do need it for some, and that would be an example of one.
Yes, yes. Okay, and then there was another thing that you were mentioning with that, which is kind of this like sort of ethical or moral consideration for this technology being available for lots of people as quickly as possible. So that way people could unleash their full creative potential into the world and have abundance in food, water, shelter, what they need, technology, energy, rather than having scarcity or trying to hold back the technology, trying to hold back with patents and lawsuits and restricted distribution. This is all very important. I like how you're very clear on that point. But then how do you, because I also want to ask this question, how do you balance the capitalistic mentality with I'm going to pour my soul and my resources into this and accrue lots of teammates and money to push this out, and then all of a sudden, someone else from around the world is just taking this and using it and not helping us do more R&D and continue with this pursuit. So how do you balance out the open sourcing with the capitalism kind of?
Right. Well, as you know, and I'm sure your viewers know, what tends to happen is the early products are expensive. As the first things of anything always are expensive. There's been this huge amount of R&D that's gone in, and so the first products are expensive, and wealthy people buy them, and that money flows back into the process to enable the next one to be a little cheaper. And as we've seen with cell phones, right? Yeah. All around the world now. Yeah. They started out, they were big, they were clunky, and they were also very expensive.
Like $3,000.
Only Wall Street, people had them.
Yeah.
but only, what is it, I don't know, 20 years later, now more and more people, even in the developing world, are getting these things. So, and really, by those old standards, these are supercomputers. And we're carrying them around in our pockets, and we think nothing of it.
20 years is also a pretty big chunk of time for someone to be connected to like a brain-computer interface, and that enabling them to achieve significantly a lot in that 20-year time span. Yeah.
Sure. So I think, and then of course, the question is, well, how do we get these open source designs for products?
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to the basics that people need, shelter, basic medical care, I think that there's enough goodwill out there in the world, and open source programmers are often not compensated for their work, but they continue to work anyway. I think we'll see that when people realize, wow, you mean we can enable people in developing countries to have a product if we just do this open source design and free it up. I think it will happen. I think people will do that. I mean, I think it will be rewarding. It'll be fun.
Yes.
People will respect you for it.
Yes.
I think they'll get social rewards, and those are often more
good,
valuable to people than financial rewards.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. As a as thinking about just a child being born today, and then them in 10 or 15 years figuring out that they want to become an open source molecular nanotechnologist as their profession, I think that would come with a great deal of social happiness, and
absolutely,
that's really cool. Okay, what I guess maybe what's needed for us to get to the level of molecular nanotechnology that we could just assemble out of the ground what we.
This is going to be a long R&D path. It's going to be expensive. It's going to involve a lot of chemists and a lot of modeling.
Chemists and modeling.
Remember those models we put up there?
Thank you, Ron. I thought I was feeling that again. There's a 15-minute time.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Those models that we put up there. It's going to take a great deal of effort in figuring out what are the steps between here and there, and modeling each step, and then doing the chemistry to actually build the devices at each step.
Yes.
And modeling out that pathway. It's going to be a long path, and there's two ways to do it. If you throw a lot of money at it, you could just go straight along the path. Or if we're going to do it commercially, then each step has to also have a spin-off product that makes money, and then the money can flow back in. So if some government or foundation wanted to throw a really massive amount of money at it, they could just go straight through and push through. Otherwise, it's going to be a very slow process where we're going to have to wait for a product makes money, goes back into the R&D.
Yes.
So it depends on whether it's done sort of in a non-profit way or a for-profit way.
And then the chemistry is needed for the molecule to be able to attach, bond to other molecule and form as you go.
Right.
So, and I wanted to ask, you were talking a little bit about simulation at the same time as chemistry. The quantum computing era is going to help with this process of running the complicated simulations, of maybe making sure that cybersecurity is doing. What is that face?
Quantum computing is probably above my pay grade. It's not a topic that I have grappled with directly. I've been assured by my computing friends that we will manage to deal with quantum computing, that we can still have computer security. We will find ways to deal with this challenge.
Yeah.
So that means that the positive side of greater computing power, we can look at that as a positive, as a benefit, and we can be happy about that. So, as computers in general get more powerful, whether they're quantum computing or not, the modeling gets easier, right? Modeling used to be much harder. Now it's easier every year. It gets easier. So you throw more compute power at the modeling software, and it just all goes faster, and that makes everything easier.
And we were just fortunate enough to have Will Zhang from Rigetti on the show teaching us about quantum computing. So I wanted to hear at least your bit on that. Okay, This has been super profound. I've been loving it. Nanotech, open source, cybersecurity. Christine, it's just such a pleasure to talk to you about all these, very scientific and technological, really important topics about driving humanity forward and doing it in a positive way. And Foresight Institute, foresight.org, go join, contribute. Now, something that's not Foresight related, remember, not Foresight related, is dating coaching.
Oh, my
surprise!
Hobby. My hobby.
Yeah. So tell us about your hobby of dating coaching, because you and I started talking about this, and it was getting exciting. And let's unpack.
Okay, so about 8 years ago, I decided it was time for me to find a new life partner. I was ready to settle down. I wanted a life partner,
but no kids.
No kids.
And the first life partner didn't work.
Well, it was a long partnership, and it worked for a long time.
Yes.
But we live long enough now that sometimes even a good partnership doesn't take us all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And may I ask, was there a preference to not have children, to focus on other things, or what was the?
I have to say, Foresight is pretty much all I could handle.
It's your child.
It pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I don't think I couldn't do both.
Yeah.
So I decided, all right, time for a life partner, and I was dating, and it just wasn't really working very well. So I decided, all right, time to do some reading here.
You were using Tinder, right?
No, this is pre-Tinder. Remember, this is before Tinder. Thank God it was before Tinder. Don't get me started.
Don't get you started.
So no, we can actually talk about why Tinder doesn't work very well.
Yes.
But so I ran across a book. It's a great book with a very clickbait title, and it's the kind of title you look at the title and you say, "This is ridiculous." The title was "Love in 90 Days," and I thought, "What a clickbait title! It must be a ridiculous book," but I picked it up. Right? It worked. And I opened it up, and they were talking about oxytocin, and they were talking about hormones. And I have some biochemistry background, and I thought, oh, this book actually has some content. Despite the silly title, it actually has some content.
And thank you, Ron's here pulling up.
Here we go. We got our slide up already.
Yes.
So I thought, well, all right, I'll buy this book. I took it home and I read it, and it talked about the biochemistry underlying the dating process and the loving and the falling in love process, and how it's different between men and women, and what that means for dating, and how to get your dating to work better. And I thought, wow, this is totally different from anything I have heard before. So I said, I'll give it a try. And how long it took before I met my husband? 90 days.
90 days.
90 days. Now, it took 2 more months before he convinced me that he was the guy, but it took 90 days. So the book title even turned out to be pretty much correct, which is so weird.
Okay, how do we fall in love differently as men or women?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what the slide here is about. So in the upper left is oxytocin, and we've all heard about oxytocin. Most people do know. I think that it's the bonding hormone. It's the cuddle hormone. It makes you feel love, and that is the hormone, as far as we understand. And this is not final science here. It's very hard to test people falling in love. We can't.
Yeah.
We don't wear continual monitors to monitor the process of our hormones going up and down.
But that's such a good idea.
It is.
It's a great idea.
It is, and someday we'll do it.
Yeah.
But on the upper left here is oxytocin, and that is apparently, as best we understand today, this is the hormone that women use to fall in love. And that makes sense. And as women have physical contact with a man, the hormone level goes up. Having an orgasm gives her a lot of it, so it helps her fall in love again. So and this all makes perfect sense, and it's how you think it ought to work.
I love how multidisciplinary you are.
Yeah.
I love that about you
Yeah.
so much. I'm so happy that you do this, because you're a role model for so many other people to not just latch into one space, but to go and
it's more fun this way. It's much more fun this way.
Yeah.
So You would think that it would work for men too, but it doesn't work that way. Men like oxytocin, and it has an effect on them, but it's not nearly as strong. On the bottom right is vasopressin. And as far as we understand now, that's how men fall in love. They need a certain amount of vasopressin in their bodies for them to switch over from just interested, interested to, falling in love and actually wanting to commit. So this, before they get the vasopressin, they're still having testosterone, which means they have a great sex drive. So that's all great. They have the lust, but that doesn't mean they have the romantic love.
Yes.
So what pushes them over from the original stages of real attraction, but it's just a physical attraction, over to this emotional attraction, this emotional commitment of romantic love and actually wanting to make a commitment to one person, is apparently, they claim, it's vasopressin.
And vasopressin, can we also think of it as like a love hormone in the man? Or?
Well, we never thought of it that way. For a long time, we thought it just had to do with blood pressure and things like that. I mean, it has many roles in the body. So we didn't think that it had this role. In fact, in the Love in 90 Days book, they thought it was dopamine. A few years ago, they thought it was dopamine. Now there's new data. We think, okay, it seems to be vasopressin.
Interesting.
But one thing we seem pretty clear on is it's not oxytocin. It's different, which means that this actually has an impact in how the romantic process needs to go in order for both parties to flip over from just this initial attraction to, oh my gosh, this is the person that I want to be with.
And it depends on if the person desires a romantic process that follows a standardized sort of like, I'm looking for the one person that I want to love for the rest of my life. So then maybe follow this process that maybe you're about to describe, versus if you're maybe desire to just be in the playing field right now, then it's different for you. You might want to follow different strategies, or if you want to just date to not have the outcome like that, then maybe different strategies, or polyamory, you want to follow different strategies. So yeah, so give us the breakdown of, if you want to be in a relationship with someone, long-term marriage kind of thing, how would one go?
Can I just say something before you continue? Why can't we just love without having to fall? Like, I think that falling in love is the lie. To say that, I fell in love, I think that's where the big lie lays. We can't be destroyed by our understanding of love, where it's all about, butterflies in my stomach and lights in my eyes and stars, and falling in love, it's dangerous. We need to love without falling.
What do you think?
I think the reason that so many people use that term, falling in love, the falling part, is that and this doesn't happen to everybody, because I didn't have this kind of reaction until I was over 40. So, and I think that means probably some people go through their whole lives and never have this happen to them. But when these hormones do what Mother Nature sort of wants them to do to you, it's an overwhelming feeling, and you feel like there's these huge chemical reactions going on in your body, and it feels like it's an out of control process.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where this falling metaphor comes from. Now
this is what Ron feels when he eats sushi. That's Ron's famous quote. When you say, I love you, Ron says, I love sushi.
I'm very cautious about, love, intimate love with a person. It's just, maybe that's just my path. It's my suggestion to be cautious, because of the love I do have in my heart, the love, my understanding of love, and how I can love thy neighbor or love my enemies. And I understand that aspect of love, whereas, you know, one-on-one, loving one person and fuck everybody else. Let's public displays of affection, and so happy that I have somebody in my life. I'm so strong, and it's dangerous and a bunch of shit. So
I think I have a good thing to say maybe here for when Ron talks about this, like falling in love versus just love. What if we could feel this sort of feeling that you're describing right now, where we can feel this change in our biochemistry?
I felt it. It's a lie.
Well, hold on.
It's not Mother Nature.
Hold on. I'm just saying, what if we could potentially have that feeling of the falling in love, but what if we could have that with the ecstasy of just being alive and taking the breaths and that kind of a thing? Could that
I think there are different ways to get to the same place. I don't think you have to, at least for women, as speaking as a, you know, I've never been male, so I can only speak for women or for myself. But I have gotten to the same place in two different ways.
Okay.
One is a gradual buildup, which is, I'm guessing, is oxytocin. You know, it's just a gradual buildup of oxytocin that took like months or years. But I've also had the falling experience too. So I know, at least in my case, I can do it two ways. And I think it may be true that men also can do that. I don't know. It would be fun to find out.
I think they can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think that this model is probably about the falling model. There may be other pathways, but I think what we need is more scientific work on this to find out. For example,
continuous love monitoring, hormone monitoring.
When I did have this falling reaction, because I have a little biochemistry background, I thought I could tell that my hormone levels were going crazy, and I thought, why can't I go to the Stanford Love Lab right now and get my blood drawn and then watch them tail off over time? It would be fascinating, but there is no Stanford Love Lab. You can't, I mean, they'd have to be like 24 hours a day. You'd have to be, get over here, you know, you just fell in love, get over here.
Get over here,
And then you'd want to do some baseline work beforehand so that you could go, okay, wow, look at them skyrocketing, and then watch them tail off over time, because they do.
Yes.
They do tail off. So yeah, I think there are multiple pathways. Cool. I wish someone at Stanford should do the Stanford Love Lab. I would totally think they would. There's a lot, they'd probably get a Nobel Prize for it.
We could even just do a love lab just in general as entrepreneurs, as long as people come in and do the baseline, like you said, and then right when they're in love, they get another blood test, and then we watch it taper down.
It's a good concept for a fictitious film, Love Lab.
The Love Lab.
Or maybe a TV series of something.
I think it should be starring Ron Vargas.
Yeah.
It would make a great rom-com thing.
Rom-com for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, just quick on the way out of the dating coaching, give us your little bit on kind of this, like the new culture that's emerged.
Right.
Yeah.
So hookup culture. So the problem, the book that I mentioned explains this, and I actually wrote my own little ebook, which I can send out for free to your readers, to your viewers about this. And the problem with hookup culture, which has been going on since the birth control pill came in the 60s, is that this very fast advancement to a physical relationship, which happens these days very quickly, means that the woman is getting lots of oxytocin. So she is moving along very quickly toward a bond. Whereas the man, it turns out that his vasopressin level, if he has sex very, very early in a relationship, apparently it drops. It actually drops. Which means it interferes with him having a bond. So she has an accelerated bond, and he thinks she's a very nice person, a great roommate, maybe a great physical relationship, but he's not feeling a long-term connection to her, not necessarily. So he's definitely not thinking of marriage or children, definitely not. So you get a lot of this where she's angry because she's in love, has been in love for months or years. They've been living together. She thought this was going somewhere. But he thought it was a roommate situation. He thought it was a friends with benefit thing. And when she starts talking about the future, he's like, I didn't sign up for this. And so women say men won't commit. Well, no, they won't commit. They didn't get the vasopressin they need to commit. So basically our biochemistries are set up for the olden days, which means before the birth control pill was approved in the 60s, when physical relationships took a lot longer, like at least a couple of months, at least, before they were consummated with a full sexual relationship. It took time.
And were we even prior to that, or if we're talking like hundreds or even thousands of years ago, were we having sex faster than a couple months, or no?
Well, it probably depends first on culture,
yeah,
of course. But I think, the marriage traditions, at least in Christianity, which has been around for a couple thousand years now, have been, marriage.
Just thinking back, like ancient civilizations, were they hooking up fast? Like, could that be the first hookup culture?
At least from, that's a big debate. There's a big debate between sex at dawn and sex at dusk. You've probably heard of sex at dawn.
Okay.
Sex at dawn said, yeah, they were hooking up all the time. Sex at dusk says, no, that's, sorry, wrong, science is wrong.
How did that come up?
How did that? Yeah. Well, there's a popular book called Sex at Dawn, which many of your viewers have probably heard of at least, which claimed that early man did a great deal of very fast and multiple sexual relationships. I haven't read this book. But then, and this got a lot of coverage. People loved it. They said, oh, we're like the bonobos.
We're like the bonobos.
We're like the bonobos.
Sure.
And then this other book came out saying, and just tore this one apart and said, the science is totally wrong. And it was called Sex at Dusk.
That's funny.
Yes, it is a cute title. Yeah. Saying this is just complete nonsense and it's just not true. So
interesting. So there is still controversial
there
evidence.
Is, but I have to say, the people I know who know more science, they're on the Sex at Dusk side. So that's why I never read the other one.
Interesting.
Even though it's a fun book and it has a really pleasurable theory that we want to believe. It would be fun if that were true. As far as I can tell, it's not true. So anyway, to wrap on this, hookup culture is disturbing the bonding process. And the answer is simple, which is slow things down. It is not necessary to, the 3-date rule, forget the 3-date rule. It's more like the at least 3-month rule, something like that.
And that's for the specific people that want to fall in love for a long-term relationship and potentially marriage.
Exactly. For those people who want that, this is, delaying things is a good pathway. For people who don't want that, it's irrelevant. The whole thing's irrelevant.
But also, there's also this kind of weird thing of like, if you wait 3 months and they're a bad lover in bed, and then you're like, screw that.
No, I don't buy that. Here's why. Well, here's why. Let's say they are bad. And you're in love with them and you end up marrying them and they're bad. What is a better hobby than getting better, right? If you want to have a nice hobby,
it's hard to teach an old horse new tricks.
No, it's not in this area. I'm not buying it. No.
I'm buying it.
What do you think all those
Kama Sutra,
books?
Get through those positions.
What about all those books and the videos and the sex toys? I'm sure couples manage.
That's right.
They manage.
Christine, this is so multidisciplinary. I love it. Okay, just a couple. We're going to rapid fire through our ending questions that we like asking our guests on the show. Do you think we are alone in the cosmos?
My working assumption in terms of just my day-to-day life is that we are. And that's not based on my own calculations. It's based on my expert friends and what they think, the stuff I've read. I just add that all up and I say, as far as I can tell, we seem to be alone. Maybe we're in a zoo, right?
Yeah.
That there's a lot of possibilities, but we're not seeing. If other civilizations, for example, had reached the molecular nanotechnology stage, and we're building Dyson spheres, we'd be seeing those black places in the sky. We're not seeing them. as far as I can tell, as far as I know. So
Dyson spheres are freaking 80s technology, and yeah.
but they're still, but the point is, yeah. So if you want to capture all the energy, though, that's what you do. So I'm not seeing evidence of anything out there. And if we're in a zoo, then it's a pretty darn. They've hidden the bars very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so alone, yes. We're thinking yes.
As far as I can tell.
As far as you can. Okay. And then what about the multidimensionality? What exists past the three-dimensional physical existence? What about that? Are we alone there?
You mean like the many universes theory, stuff like that?
Or even maybe even what exists past us, spiritually as well.
I'm going to leave that to others just because it's not something I spend time on.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm pretty practical.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have a practical impact on me or humanity or the earth, I figure I have so many problems just with that getting into multi-dimensions and it's just not on my to-do list. Maybe someday, if I live long enough.
We'll have to take psilocybin and hit up Golden Gate Park sometime, Christine. That would be such a trip. Okay, do you think we're in a simulation?
Well, that's a great question. I asked two of my favorite experts. First, Brad Templeton, who you might have on someday. He's very amusing.
That would be a lot of fun.
He's a very amusing guy. He points out that simulation, that word implies that there's a different reality, that this is not a real world we're in. But this, he points out, is our reality. So rather than use the word simulation, he prefers the word either artificial world or synthetic world or perhaps emulated world. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go with the term emulated world just for now. And I think he makes a good point because simulation does imply that it's not reality, and we do know this is our reality.
But an emulated world would also imply that it is not a reality.
It's not the only reality.
Yeah.
There's other we're emulating something else. And then Anders Sandberg, also a very interesting person that you might consider. His point was, does it really make a difference? Because how would we change our behavior? And there are those of us, for example, those of us in this room who enjoy thinking about this and find it an interesting, amusing concept. But it doesn't really, it wouldn't affect my day-to-day life to know that we were in an emulation. I do think that many people, probably not the ones who watch your show, would be very disturbed by this idea that we are in a simulation or emulation, that this would disturb them. It might interfere with their own creation stories that they believe about the world. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I don't push the idea too much, because I think it could rile up folks and make them uncomfortable when, and what they might do, I don't know what look what they've already done politically. So I'm just going to let that alone. Are we in an emulation? I joke around and I say, well, let's not talk about it because they might pull the plug.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of joking, but I'm sort of not joking. It's sort of like, if there were an emulation and I were running the emulation and everybody in the emulation got all focused on this issue, it might get boring and I might say, oh, okay, this one's over, Yeah. So I was like, no,
this one's over.
Maybe we'll just stick talking about,
this one's over.
Let's just talk about nanotechnology and AI and not worry too much about the emulation side. I don't want them pulling the plug.
Okay, good answer. Last question.
Oh, come on, hurry up. I have to go and kill myself.
Uh-oh. See, I told you. I told you.
Yeah. Last question is, what do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
Ah, yes, I was looking forward to this one. I think the most beautiful thing in the world is the healthy human body. The strong, healthy human body. And both for its aesthetic value, and also because of what it contains, what it represents. It's the world's most complex object. It is the world's, to me, most interesting object. most of the human beings I know are good people. They have wonderful values and ethics and morals. They're basically good folks. So and I don't think the human body needs to be adorned. That's why whenever I see a tattoo, I think, oh, you've tattooed the Mona Lisa. Why did you do that? You know, you don't need to do that. You were beautiful before, you know. We're all beautiful. And if only young people knew how beautiful they were. You know, when we're young.
With the homeostatic capacity, with that ability to just be rockingly healthy at a very young age, that is so nice.
When we're young and super healthy, we're only focused on, oh, I'm not as beautiful as I could be, instead of realizing how beautiful they already are. If only when we were young, we all realized how beautiful we are already, you know.
Well, they don't tell us that.
They don't tell us that.
how stupid we are.
Mr. Rogers did.
And why can't you lose weight? And why can't you be more like your brother?
It's true. It's true.
This has been such an incredible ride. I am so grateful.
So let's tell folks where the websites are.
Yes, foresight.org.
So foresight.org. There's also existentialhope.com. Those are the top two. And then if they want to email me about the book,
yes,
I'll send it free.
Beautiful.
I don't know how you want to do that.
We can put the link in the bio in the description of the video.
Great.
Let's do that.
All right.
And then we'll also have a direction as well for them with that.
Perfect.
Wow, so multidisciplinary. We'll have the links in the bio for you. Christine, this has been such a pleasure talking about all these incredible exponential technologies and what's going on in the world and how to positively guide technology. Thank you for your work in this field so much, and thank you for coming on to the show.
This has been a blast.
I'm glad you've had fun.
I knew I would.
Plenty more of these good conversations to come.
Sure.
And more. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you guys had a good time, give us a comment below with your thoughts. Tell us about the good, the bad, the ugly, what you're doing around this sector. We just want to build more community and more conversation. Also, go and create with this content. Go write blogs. Go make cool businesses. Go and make cool videos. Go and execute. Go and build into our world. Thank you, Ron, our producer-director. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Peace.